Hi, I'm Anna. I'm part of the Gardens and Grounds team. Part of my job is to grow plants that will be used in the outdoor gardens. My principal focus is growing native plants, but I grow all sorts of temperate plants as well. We're in one of my outdoor growing areas here at the production facility, and I just wanted to show you around a little bit. This is where I grow most of the woody plants once they get to be of the size that they can go outside. As you can see, we just recently rebuilt some of the frames here, and I'm going to show you a little bit about what my system is. They're best management practices for nurseries and greenhouses, but every operation is a little bit different and so need to adapt those practices to fit their systems. What I'm working on with the woody species is to improve a root system so that when these plants are planted in the gardens, they'll be more successful. Now the things out here are plants that are either difficult to come by in the trade, maybe of size, or they may be things that are wild collected or of historical significance. This first frame here has some roses, and those will go into our rose garden potentially. What's unique about our rose garden is that we try to not use the fungicides and pesticides that are normally required for roses. That can be a challenge, particularly in our region. So we like to give new cultivars a year here to evaluate before we plant them in the garden. So what I have here is a nice, well-drained garden soil. When we get the plants in, we'll bare root them just like if it were a normal garden bed. And then we will watch them and see how they fare. For container-grown woodies, you want a root system with lots of branching fibrous roots, which don't circle the plant. A focus on research has been on air root pruning to achieve this better root architecture. And primarily the way of doing that is by picking a different pot. As you see here, this pot has holes up and down the length of the pot as well as at the bottom, as well as sort of a graduated stair step. This one here is even more basket-like with a lot more air exposure. Both of those would be considered root pruning pots. You can compare that to something you're more likely to see, which is this just standard pot with holes at the bottom for drainage. The benefit of having all these holes is that when a root grows to the air pocket at the edge of the pot, it stops growing longer and branches instead. You can imagine how this would help roots that would otherwise wrap around the edge of the pot. Once I decided on a pot that air root prunes, I had to decide how I was going to organize and stabilize the plants. Some options would be growing them on just a level gravel surface, maybe stake them, or other containers you might want to sink into mulch to hold them up. But in order to get the advantage of root pruning, I'm doing a modified pot-in-pot system. Now this is something that would normally be done in a field. Growers would go through, dig a really long trench with drainage at the bottom, a socket pot on the bottom. You see here I have a slightly larger pot staked to the ground. Within that, I'll put the plants in the root pruning container and set it within that. Even though they nest somewhat tightly, there's a nice column of air between the two pots that allows for that air root pruning. The socket pot is going to stay there for as long as it holds up. And then I place mulch around the socket pots to help moderate the temperatures of the roots. As the plants grow, they'll be repotted up from 3-gallon to 5-gallon, 15-gallon, maybe as much as 20-gallon. And from there, they will get into our garden. What you see here with this small tree with the sort of reddish bark is a cornice controversa. Now that was grown from a seed that one of my colleagues brought back just over 2 years ago. It's been potted up multiple times and will be planted in the garden hopefully this coming fall. Let me pop off the pot and let you see what those root pruning pots look like. What you see here is inside of that root pruning pot. A lot of nice, well-distributed fibrous roots to bring up the water and nutrients. Where my thumb is here is where one of those air pockets was, and you can see the end of that root is a little bit blunted and branched. What I'm not seeing a lot of are roots that wrap around the entire root ball, so I'm glad to see that. So some of the trees that we have out here right now are things that were wild collected from some colleagues in Japan, some colleagues in Texas, a few trees of historical significance. Some of the things are things that we're trialing and trying to grow on, like those yellow-fruited hollies back there. This tree that you see here with the leaves still on it, that is a Quercus suber. That's the cork oak that is commonly found in the Mediterranean. So we're going to see whether that fares well in our climate. By about June, this whole area should be filled up with mostly woody plants, but we'll probably put some herbaceous perennials here in these shallower frames as well. That's it for me. Thanks for joining us on the production facility tour. We hope to see you soon.